Tiptoe through the garden, through the further, like the first four movies. Yes, this is a franchise because Blumhouse made this for some cheap bucks and made 100 million in the first four, and now they made a fifth one directed by Patrick Wilson, who was in a lot of better movies than this Insidious sequel that nobody fucking asked for. But let's tiptoe through the garden, through the further, for hopefully the last time. Insidious, the red door. Not Insidious, the red green door. Get your duct tape and get your handyman tool and get all that stuff and go up to Canada and make something better than Insidious, the red door. Which, yes, was directed by Patrick Wilson, who has been in much better movies, such as these. All of these. He was in all of these movies. All of the... Watch these. Watch these backwards. Watch them in whatever language you want. Make up your own commentary. Heck, even The Conjuring 3, that admittedly was not nearly as good as The Conjuring 1 and 2. Well, at least it was better than Insidious the Red Door. Am I tipping off how I felt about this movie? Well, let's get into it. So I did recently review the first four entries into the Insidious franchise, and Blumhouse, Jason Blum, or Bloom, however you goddamn say it, I really don't fucking care, is a brilliant filmmaker and a brilliant producer. Well, he's mainly a brilliant producer because he finds a way to make a lot of money with small budgeted movies. The first Insidious cost $1.5 million. I think the second one was $5 million. I think the next two were $10 million. This one cost $16 million. And yes, Patrick Wilson, who is a terrific goddamn actor and really does seem to understand film. I mean, sure, In the Tall Grass was absolute shit, but even he couldn't have saved that. But he took the director's chair because everybody else said, no, we don't want anything to do with this. James Wan helped produce this, who, again, also helped produce these movies. And he also helped produce the Annabelle movies, all the Conjuring Universe movies, and The Nun 2's coming out. Yeah, we're getting more horror that nobody really fucking asked for as somebody that has all the Conjuring Universe movies, even the bad ones. But it was also directed, or at least rather was produced, by the man that directed a couple of those movies. You know, Oren Peli, who, man, he created quite a franchise here, didn't he? Yeah, Insidious, The Red Door. So it was written, well, the story was done by Lee Winnell, and it was mainly written by Scott Teems. If that name sounds unfamiliar, Halloween Kills and the Firestarter remake. I wanted to set everybody on fire that did Firestarter, Twisted Firestarter. Man, that movie was really fucking lame. So yeah, Patrick Wilson, Ty Simpkins, Rose Byrne, still absolutely would. She looks great. And a few others return in this sequel to Chapter 2. Now, here's the Insidious timeline, such as it is, before I get into, well, anything about the plot, such as it is. You had Insidious Chapter 1, and then immediately Insidious Chapter 2. I mean, there was a 2-year difference, but timeline-wise, there you go, and then you get Insidious the Red Door. But before that, you get Insidious Chapter 3, that had Dermot Mulroney as its lead actor in a 2015 flick, and all due respect to him. But if his role in Scream 6 was anything to go by, don't really think you should rely on that guy to be a leading actor. And then Insidious, The Last Key. It should have been the last movie. Actually, the first one should have been the last movie, but because they made so much goddamn money, and people seemed to like them for some goddamn weird reason. I mean, they kept making money despite the audience and critical reception dipping further down. And even though I hated the first four, even though I recognized there were some good parts to them, maybe they'll send out the franchise right. They did send it off right. And that I never want to see any of these fucking movies ever goddamn again. It's like they took the bare bones of what was left of the husk, the corpse of the Insidious movies, and just said, yeah, we're going to cobble this together and we're going to stretch out scenes. This should have been 80 minutes, and even then, it would have been stretched out. Patrick Wilson better get another crack at directing a film that is better than this, because he's not the only problem. The acting wasn't particularly great. None of the characters are fleshed out. There was a new character, Chris Sinclair Daniel, who I really hope gets a chance to be in a better horror movie and in better movies going forward, because she showed some promise. So yeah, literally 9 years after all the bullshit that happened with Insidious Chapter 2. Okay, I'm going to have to spoil some of Insidious Chapter 2, but then again, if you're watching the fifth Insidious without seeing any of the other ones, you're not going to understand what the hell's going on. At the end of Insidious Chapter 2, you had Steve Coulter's character, Carl, that decided, hey, you want to forget this stuff? Okay, you killed my friend, Lynn Shay, but nevertheless, yeah, I'll help you forget. Let's just bury your stuff further. You will only remember your son, Dalton, played by Ty Simpkins. You only remember his coma and him waking up. You won't remember anything else, like the Darth Maul demon and the other stuff, and the weird nun bride ghost that possessed people, and all the other stuff where they tried to add this deep narrative to something that really didn't have a deep narrative. It just should have been about ghosts and demons and stuff, and it was really, really lame. I don't even understand how the first one is revered in any circles. Because it's PG-13, so it's hard to do horror when you do have a PG-13 rating. Now, that being said, you can do it if you have the ability to be smart about it. And this one wasn't. And then the aforementioned sequels, or prequels, and then sequel to the prequel that went into the first one, and it made the story more convoluted than it needed to be. And the Lamberts must journey back into the further when their repressed memories come back to haunt them, and they must figure out how to stop everything once and for all. $16 million budget, as opposed to a $10 million budget for, I believe, the last two entries. And okay, that's a little beefier, but really, really low for a horror movie, so it's almost a guarantee that this will probably make at least $80 to $100 million, unless word of mouth gets out that this is absolute goddamn dog shit and a complete desecration of horror, and one of the worst films that I have seen this year. One of the worst films I've seen this decade. I hated this. I absolutely hated this. And I didn't go in with very high expectations, but I'm like, okay, I'm going to give it a chance. And within the first 10 minutes, I said, this is terrible. This is absolutely terrible. We find out that certain things have happened in the family, and the family is fractured, and then Dalton gets into liberal arts school, befriends a girl named Chris Sinclair Daniel, and then from there, we get his story, and then we get Patrick Wilson's as Josh's story, and we get dredging up memories and all this stuff, and really bad jump scares, and a very obvious story that takes no twists, no turns. Nobody is in danger. At least in the first Insidious, people were sort of in danger. In the second Insidious, while it wasn't great, people kind of could sort of be considered in danger. And then the prequel, you knew nothing was going to happen to these particular characters because they're still around. Same with The Last Key. And even though they tried to be visceral, they also made it incredibly dark to the point you couldn't see what the fuck was going on. And I'm just going to do this now because I don't need any more of these notes. They do have Tiny Tim's Tiptoe Through the Tulips, hence the terrible intro there. But I'm going to give you a few examples, just describing them because I don't want to get copyrighted, of how bad the jump scares are in this. One, nothing really happens for like the first 30 or so minutes. And even though Sinclair Daniel and Ty Simpkins attempt to have a little bit of comedy about them, it's equal parts something about his college life, and then also people don't want to tell Dalton or Josh about all this terrible stuff because of all the events that happened in Insidious Chapter 1 and 2, and oh no, we can't tell all this, but clearly this fucked up shit is happening, so we probably should say something. And, you know, all these dredged up memories and all this emotional stuff and all this fractured family life. And look, that would be fine if I gave a shit about any of these characters to begin with. I didn't. I wouldn't have cared if the character of Dalton as a kid freaking rotted away. And I don't mean the actor, I mean the character. Because who gives a shit about any of these people? None of them feel like real people. Barbara Hershey ain't in this. That's a disappointment, considering she looked absolutely incredible in Insidious Chapter 1 and Insidious Chapter 2. She was in her early 60s in both of those. But this one, the problem is it just feels unnecessary. It feels like DLC. It feels like they took Chapter 1 and 2, they ignored 3 and 4, which is probably smart because those are two really terrible entries, and just said, we're gonna just tack on a little bit to Chapter 2. The problem is the story had nowhere to go after Chapter 1. And then has just been limping and dragging its body along or whatever, and then it just hits a goddamn wall like it's Dale Earnhardt Sr. and it just keeps hitting over and over, and then it bashes into a tunnel like Princess Diana and her driver. And I might as well just make these jokes because I really don't goddamn care. I can't stand how horror movies like this get made when there are actual indie horror movies that have decent ideas, if not necessarily wholly original, that have almost no money. And this schlock is, just pushed out into theaters, and it will make money, and suckers like me will go see it, but it's just so disappointing to see a franchise that had no business becoming a franchise end up in the state where now 12 years later we have hopefully the last entry in the goddamn franchise, at least for a while. Jason Blum, I don't really goddamn care how it's said again. He has said it's going on or at least a long rest. Well, it's been 5 years since the first or the last one, and it was like 2011, 2013, 2015, 2018, and then 2023. So you could wait 10 goddamn years, do another one, and it really wouldn't goddamn matter. None of the scares are good. This whole thing of doing the astral projection and going into the spirit world and having to battle against these demons or battle away from these demons and not endanger people and do all this stuff and see these things, and none of it's scary. It all feels just cheap, and the jump scares are cheap, and yeah, there are a few halfway decent shots where there's something in the background and that sort of looks cool. The problem is none of it works at all, and it's just a lame duck terrible horror movie that reaches a conclusion that I couldn't help but just say, that's it, that's fucking it, that's what you're fucking doing, that's what you did, that's what you had the entire, fan base, the audience sit through 4 goddamn entries of diminishing quality and diminishing writing and diminishing other bullshit. And it's kind of proves, by the way, that Lee Winnell probably was the better of the 2 writers, because oh boy, Scott Teems, Halloween Kills, Firestarter. I don't really think this guy should be allowed to write anything horror-related anymore, because he clearly doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. He really doesn't know. This was an abomination. This was an abomination against horror. This was an abomination against filmmaking. Man, Insidious, The Red Green Door was terrible. The Red Green Door would have been better. If you guys get the Red Green reference, I will love you guys forever. And I'm also giving probably too much credit because I don't know how many people are old enough or remember enough obscure TV, especially from Canada, to recall that. Nevertheless, Patrick Wilson, hopefully he gets a better crack at a better film, directing a better film, that is. And it's just terrible. And it tries to wrap up everything in a nice, neat little bow, but you don't give a shit because none of the characters matter. I'm going to get into spoilers, by the way, because this isn't going to take very long. 3, 2, 1, spoilers. Okay. Ty Simpkins paints or draws the red door, and he keeps drawing stuff from his memories and art class. And then he meets Chris. They go to a frat party. He sees a ghost that's throwing up. And the frat party has the people dressed up in diapers. Why? I don't goddamn know. Frat parties are stupid. Nevertheless, there's an implied pseudo-romance with Dalton and Chris. I mean, they didn't quite go that route, but they could have gone that way. Josh is conflicted because Barbara Hershey passed away. That was the woman that played his mother. Still would. She's freaking gorgeous. Nevertheless, let's get off of that. And he's distant from his family. This is also after being hypnotized and unable to do anything to, get this brain fog out. It made him slower and more sluggish. Rose Byrne divorced him, and now he has a fractured relationship with his family, including Dalton, and then they separate after college, and Josh is worrying about his own stuff, and he's seen this weird ghost. It turns out to be his dad. He sees these, he's looking at these pictures, trying to get his memory right, and this ghost is stalking him. There's this deal where there's this box of all these pictures and this letter that the dad wrote to, or something that the dad wrote to Barbara Hershey, because he ended his life in 1978, and Josh never knew his dad. This ends with me. It turns out the dad can do astral projection, which means you basically can sleepwalk and go into another dimension. But if you go further and further, like Lynn Shay said, then there you go. You are fucked. Also, Angus Sampson, and which I think I've called Simpson in previous reviews, and I would apologize, but I don't care. And Lee Winnell appear in one little thing doing like some YouTube video, crazy, spooky ghost thing with halfway decent graphics. More thought was put into that than put into the scares in this movie. And then we have, the occasional bumps in the night, the Darth Maul demon. And trying to, at one point, Rose Byrne helps Patrick Wilson go deep into the further to rescue his son, because his son flashes back to something after seeing his picture and seeing his painting and all this stuff, and his art class is totally forgotten about by this point. Chris doesn't want to help him, but then agrees to help him because she likes him, or because they need a character to potentially die or be put in danger. And Dalton ends up possessed, and then Patrick Wilson has to rescue him and has to get away, get him back, tiptoe through the tulips, unshackle him, and then rescue him, and then shut the red door because they've been told by other ghosts, shut the door, shut the door. And then they shut the red door, and Patrick Wilson says, I'm going to sacrifice myself, you go. Okay. And then Rose Byrne basically says, no, come back, come back. So he does. After leaving the memories, the picture box to his dad. And then he's back, and then everything's fine. And you know why everything's fine? Because Dalton gets back, he wakes up, and then he paints the door black. Because, god damn it, Mick Jagger was right all this time. He saw a red door, and he wanted to paint it black. There you go. See? There you go. The Paint It Black reference with more fireworks going off, despite the fact 4th of July has been over for a bit, but there are neighbors that are idiots here. That being said, yeah, it was all back to a Rolling Stones song. They should have made this about as long as a Rolling Stones song, because it felt about 3 hours and it was about an hour and 40 minutes. Also, there's a little tease at the end, but first, Josh sees Elise, Lynn Shay, and says, you will see your mother one day, but not yet, not yet. Sorry, I mixed the Gladiator line in there. And then we see something at the very end where the light appears over the black door or the black painted door. Oh no, maybe they didn't shut it all the way. Maybe the Darth Maul demon will come back. Who cares? Who fucking cares? I guarantee you this, by the time they make another Insidious movie, I ain't going to be doing any of these reviews. God damn it, this was headache inducing. This was rotten. Terrible scares, not very well written characters. Scott Teems should never be allowed near a horror script ever again. And that's all I have to say about that. Gets an F just in case you couldn't fucking figure that out. The worst entry in the Insidious franchise by far. So, agree, disagree, what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.